My wife and I bought a new house recently. It's a little larger than what we need, but we plan to have a family soon, and we usually have guests, so this worked. The neighborhood is quiet, and the neighbors so far have been nice. A little over a week ago, my sister said that there were some rescue vehicles outside of our house when she came by to pick up the clothes that she had left in our dryer. When I went home to check during my lunch break, I realized that they must have been there for the elderly woman next door to us. I didn't ask the other neighbors, but I assumed something had happened to her and she had to go to the hospital. Since she wasn't home and I didn't see any cars pull into her driveway, I decided that the neighborly thing to do was to take care of her yard and mail while she was in the hospital. We always waved hello to her when we saw her, and whenever I noticed that her trash bins were left on the street, I'd bring them into her yard and put them by her back door for her. Now I'd get her mail every day after work and put them into the box. I'd also check to make sure all her doors and windows were locked. This past weekend, I was mowing my grass and decided to mow hers as well. Since it was autumn, the days got shorter. By the time I finished her yard, there wasn't much light out anymore. I called my wife to come help me bag everything up so we could be done before dark. While in our neighbor's yard, we noticed one of the room's light flicker in the house. Great, we thought. Maybe she came home or one of her kids came by to grab her stuff. My wife ran into our house to grab the box of mail. I met her out front and we knocked on the door. It was weird that there were no cars in the driveway, like there usually was when her kids came to visit her, but we didn't pay it any mind at the time. We were going to give up and assumed that whoever came by had already left when the front door opened. To our surprise, it was actually our neighbor. We introduced ourselves and learned that our neighbor's name was Grace. We mentioned our concern for her and told her that we had been watching her property while she was away. She invited us in and we talked for a while. She was really interested in our culture and joked that she wished that her people cared about the elderly as much as we did. My wife and I left and told her to feel free to ask us for anything whenever she was in need. We went to my parents' house the next day for fun. When we got home, there was a big U-Haul in front of the neighbor's yard and people in the driveway. We parked and walked over. There, we were met with smiles by her daughter Lily and grandkids. Her daughter said that they were moving our neighbor's belongings into storage and that they'd be putting the house up for sale within the next few months. Her mother had mentioned that we were a new couple to the area and that we were really nice to her. We acknowledged the compliment and told Lily that if Grace needed anything, she could always come over to our place. Lily smiled and told us that it was a kind gesture, but her mother had passed away in her home the day the ambulance was outside. Lily had gone over with groceries and found Grace lifeless in her bed. Confused and a bit scared, my wife and I offered our condolences and went to our house. We were just talking to Grace the night before. I told my wife not to worry and to just put it in the back of her mind. This morning, my wife frantically woke me up. I thought she was late for work, but when I opened my eyes, I saw the fear in her face. She told me to check the house to make sure no one was in it with us. I swept through all the rooms and checked to make sure the doors were all locked. I asked her why she was so worried, and then she took me to the kitchen. There, on the dining table, was the box of mail we had brought over to Grace's house the other night. I told my wife that we may have brought it back by accident, and she assured me that she didn't do it. I knew I didn't do it either, but pretended that it was a possibility. My wife was really scared, so she left for work first, while I was finishing getting ready. While I was clearing the mist from my car windows, I noticed what looked to be Grace wave at me from the window next door. I pretended not to notice and drove off. A few years ago, my girls and I attended an event located in Fresno, California. We checked into the hotel at about 3 p.m. The parking was right in front of our room, We were exhausted from the long day, so we all decided to take a nap before heading out to dinner. It was around 3:30 p.m. when we finally settled down. Not long into our nap, I heard loud footsteps walking. This woke me up and I listened and noticed it was coming from the room right above us. The loud footsteps sounded like a woman in heels pacing back and forth on what sounded like hardwood or tile. The footsteps were pacing from one end of the room to the other end of the room. Laying in bed listening for a while, I finally dozed off, but was still able to hear the same heels pacing back and forth. We were in bed about over an hour, and by this time, I was pretty annoyed. So I finally got up, looked at the time, and it was almost 5 p.m. Mind you, the footsteps were still occurring. By this time, my girls also got up. My oldest daughter said to me, "I couldn't sleep because of the loud footsteps." I was contemplating about calling the front desk because it was happening for too long, and I was pretty annoyed at this point. The footsteps finally stopped, and we heard the door to the room upstairs open and close. I walked to the window to see if I could catch a glimpse of who that person was. Since our room was facing the parking lot, and by the way of the layout the hotel was, I would be able to see the person walking out to their car if they were to walk from the stairs. But I noticed that there was no one. Confused at what just happened, I brushed it off. Later that evening, we were watching TV when we heard the upstairs door open again. The pacing back and forth started. This time, it didn't last long, only for about 5 minutes. Then, it suddenly stopped like nothing happened. We didn't hear anything else for the rest of that evening. The next morning, while we checked out, I mentioned to the front desk about this. The employee gave me a confused look and said that no one was checked in the room above us. At that point, I was afraid, so this would be my first and last time staying at this hotel. We all walked out and left. Later on, thinking about that incident, it finally dawned on me that the rooms were on carpet. How could we hear footsteps in heels, and who can walk back and forth in heels for over an hour? Whoever and whatever it was must have been a spirit trapped in a repetitive state. My family went on a camping trip somewhere an hour away from St. Paul. At the campground, there was a pump thingy that we used to pump water from a well. That's where we got water and did the dishes. This campground was not hidden as the roads and other camp areas were visible. My cousin Mai was washing dishes at one point at the well pump. Mai glanced over to the other side of the campground. There was a small picnic table and fire pit. Mind you, we spent the whole week there, and there was no one at the camp area. As Mai glanced over, she saw an old white man sitting at the picnic table just staring at her. She didn't think nothing of it and continued washing the dishes. A couple of weeks after camp, Mai was driving home from her boyfriend's house. She saw an old man standing at the corner of a street. This happened 4 times within a few weeks. Driving home and going to her boyfriend's house, it finally clicked in Mai's head. This old man looks familiar. I've seen him somewhere before. Mai finally figured out where she had seen the old man. It was from that camp. He was the one sitting at the picnic table at the other campground staring at her. She thought to herself that he lived nearby and probably went to camp that very same weekend that we did. What a coincidence, right? One morning at around 2 to 3 a.m., Mai was driving home from her boyfriend's house. It was snowing hard outside, and it was difficult to see, so Mai was driving slowly and carefully. As she was driving, she saw something in front of her, so she stopped. It was a person standing there in the middle of the road blocking her. As the person was standing there, Mai high-beamed her headlights at the person. Mai said that as she got closer, she knew who exactly it was. It was that old man. All of a sudden, the old man dropped to the ground and started rolling around like a maniac. Mai started to panic. As she was about to open her door to go out and help, she snapped out of it and told herself, it was 3 in the morning. Who the heck would be out at this time in this weather? So she started to drive again and drove past the old man going off the shoulder of the road. The next day, Mai told her parents about the old man from camp and her encounter last night. Her parents called a shaman over. The shaman asked if Mai felt or knew if something was following her. She said that she thought so. The shaman then asked if Mai had been anywhere near or spent a night in a forest. Mai said that a few months ago, the family went camping and that was the last time she was in a forest. The shaman said that she could see an old elderly man roughly in his late 60s following her. He was not alive. Instead, he's a ghost. Supposedly, he likes Mai and followed her home. And so my cousin got scared, and the shaman said for her not to worry. The shaman folded up a piece of joss paper and told Mai to put it in her purse or somewhere near her at all times. The joss paper was to serve as a barrier to block Mai from the old man, and ever since then, Mai never had any problems with that spirit anymore. What I am about to talk about is something I wish I never encountered. It was about to be fall, the end of summer. My boyfriend and I had decided to go fishing at our favorite spot. We brought all of our camping and fishing gear. We did our normal walk through and found our spot at the end of the trail. We set up camp and started fishing, but when the sun began to set, we began collecting firewood and building a fire. We managed to keep the mosquitoes away with what was left of the abandoned fire. Little did we know, there was going to be more in store for us. As we lit up the lantern, I could feel the top of the tree swaying in a very cold breeze. My hair stiffened up. I told my boyfriend, "Can you hurry up? It's cold and the fire isn't lighting so good." He said, "I'm trying, but I don't know why it's not lighting up." As we were working to get better lighting, I felt a sense of dread mixed with sadness and hate, but I kept pressing him on. I looked outwards towards the trees swaying without any wind and felt fear, a fear of knowing that we were not alone and that we had trespassed. I begged him one more time to light up the fire, and it finally lit up, but my fear was not at ease as I heard the leaves get trampled after the top of the trees stopped. I kept looking straight at nothing, darkness, but feeling uneasy. We kept fishing until I felt a sudden urge of tiredness, so I told my boyfriend that I was going to go into bed. A few minutes later, I felt the whole tent lifting, and on my end of the tent, it fluttered. My fear struck in, and I laid down quietly. I turned to the tent door and looked outside to hear my boyfriend yelling and shouting. I thought to myself, was it him? Maybe he's drunk. I found the courage to run out, and he had his machete on one hand and was screaming that he was not afraid. At this point, I thought that he had one too many beers, so I went to lay down in the tent. But then, I heard him shout again and jumped right back up and ran outside without even thinking. I noticed that he had caught a fish. He was pulling in and reeling the fish. What he caught was a 32-inch split tail. I had never seen in my entire life a split tail that big. He thrusted his machete over his head as if I was in fear. During this whole time, he was preaching, and he said to me that he was getting rid of the demon. To me, I thought he was just still drunk. While thinking, my lantern started to slowly die. That's when the hair on the back of my neck shot straight up. I asked my boyfriend if we had any more propane. He dropped the fish and looked around. For some reason, I had this deep sense of an ominous feeling, a sense of complete fear as we had no light. As we both lay down to sleep, my boyfriend passed out and I was slowly drifting off. That's when I noticed something walking by me around the tent to the tent door. I nudged my boyfriend, but he was passed out. I nudged him again, and this time he said that I knew where the gun and a knife is. As he said that, I heard the zipper slowly unzipping, and I turned to him to see if he was passed out. I was dozing off even when I fought in my sleep. It was a very dark shadow that came through the door. It had a smile that sent shivers down my spine. I knew what was going on. As soon as I saw it, I reached over to grab the knife. It then took its fangs and dove right into my head. It hurted so much, and I felt the blood go down my head, dripping with fear and fighting. As I ripped its jaws off my head, it was not afraid of me. It just smiled. It grinned. It transformed itself into everything I was afraid of, from looking like my father to the smallest insect. It could see all the fears inside of me. As I fought and kicked, my boyfriend finally woke up and asked if I was okay since I kicked him. I told him about the ordeal, and he just said that he thought it was me playing tricks on him because he heard me giggling and laughing and throwing things at him. So he got mad and thought that I was just playing a prank. The both of us left early into the morning. We'd never been back since. This happened to us at a place called Joe's Landing in Sacramento, California. When my family was moving into a new house, we were all trying to get used to which rooms we all preferred. Next to our home was an abandoned house. We were on the corner of the block by the small street and big street. I remembered as a child, my sisters would tell me that the abandoned home was haunted. That's why no one wanted to live in it. Then, across from us, there was a Hmong funeral chapel. Anyways, when I was around 6 or 7 years old, I shared a room with my older sister just for the one night that I remembered. We placed our bed parallel to the door and closet with our toes towards the window. My sister chose the bedside by the door and closet. On my side of the bed, there was a walkway gap between the bed and the wall, which was facing the abandoned house. She woke me up in the middle of the night, maybe at around the witching hour. I asked her why did she wake me up when we needed to sleep for school. "Can you hear that?" she asked me. I was tired but turned to her. "Hear what?" Hear the girl crying," she whispered. I was slowly waking up because she wouldn't let me sleep since she was scared. I decided to listen carefully because I was a bit curious. My sister was whimpering. Then, that's when I heard it. To me, it sounded like a cat crying. My sister patted me and pointed by the corner where my feet were facing. "She's right there, standing by the corner, crying." I immediately got scared and turned away. "Go to sleep. I don't want to miss school." Ever since then, she didn't sleep in that room with me anymore. I didn't sleep there either. I don't remember if she ever told her parents about it, but my other sister would tell me that the only person that likes scaring people is the scaredy cat in the family. I've only experienced this twice. The first time I experienced it was when I was 17 years old. It was summer, the end of my junior year in high school. My friends came over to my place to hang out that one night. We were listening to pop music videos, playing drinking card games, 2-liter soda bottles since we had no one to buy us alcohol. The guys said that it was getting late and that they were going home. After I walked my friends out, we made plans for the next weekend with them. After that, I went back upstairs to my bedroom. I didn't close my door all the way and was too tired to walk back down the stairs to close my bedroom door. I sleep upstairs by myself while the rest of my family members all sleep on the first floor of the house. I was so tired that I just wanted to sleep. The moment I turned off my lamp, I heard my bedroom door slowly squeak open. At first, I thought it was just my mom checking up on me. Then I heard heavy footsteps on the staircase. and it walked past the light switch. I thought to myself, why didn't my mom turn on the lights? Shortly after hearing a few heavy footsteps, I felt a dark presence in my room, and now I could hear footsteps at the other end of my bedroom. I was very scared as the other end of my room was pitch black. I had the blanket covering my head as I decided to take a peek. All I could see was a fuzzy outline of a dark, shadowy figure. This figure was darker than my room. As I quickly covered myself with my blanket, I realized that I couldn't move. I couldn't call for help. It felt like as if I was tied down. From being too tired, I fell asleep. That night, I had many nightmares. I woke up kicking and screaming. I looked at my clock and it was 7:10 a.m., but it felt like I was calling for help for a very long time. I went downstairs and told my mom about it. She just brushed it off and said that it was because of the nightmares. The second time I experienced sleep paralysis was when I was far away for tech school. Classes started at 7:30 a.m. and it was only 5 miles away from the student housing. They have a dress code and you had to look clean, meaning well-shaved, nice haircut, and all of that nonsense. I was living with one other roommate, but he had night classes and I rarely ever saw him. Sometimes, I didn't even see him on the weekends because of work and bar nights. It was early Friday morning. My roommate opened my bedroom door to tell me that he was going to be out for the weekend. I was in a deep sleep and only heard bits and pieces of it, but I knew it was almost time to get up for class. After my roommate left the house, my alarm clock went off shortly afterwards. I said to myself, just let me sleep for 5 more minutes. Not long after that, I heard my bedroom door open. I thought it was my roommate again since I only had one eye squinting at the bedroom door. Then after that, I knew I couldn't get up. I tried and just felt this heavy weight on me. I was able to lift my head up to see what was preventing me from getting up. I just got a glimpse of a humanoid figure sitting at the end of my bed. I was literally fighting to get up for class because if I was late or missed a class, it was 10% of my grade down the drain. I didn't wake up until an hour later and was late for class. My instructor asked me why I was late. I simply told him that there was something sitting on me. All the American students, including the instructor, laughed, and my instructor said that I shouldn't be bringing big gals from the bar back home. My Native American classmate that sat next to me wasn't laughing at all and said to me that it was a spirit up to no good. On a Saturday night in October in the state of Wisconsin, John decided that after hanging out with his cousins, it was too dark and too late to go home. His cousins asked if John wanted to sleep over since it was getting late, and he was unable to find a ride to go home. None of the adults were home that day, and he decided that it would be fun to have a sleepover. After staying up late eating ice cream, chips, and watching movies, Mary was too tired and fell asleep downstairs in the living room. John and his cousins turned off the lights and went upstairs to sleep in Terry's bedroom. As soon as they got to the room, his younger brother Harry went straight to bed and fell asleep. The room was dark and quiet with no noise in sight other than Terry's younger brother snoring. 30 minutes went by, and John could not sleep. He kept hearing the water drip in the pipe from inside the drywall. Tick, tick, tick. Then suddenly, he heard the cry of a baby's voice. The crying sounded like the baby was 2 to 3 months old, and it was crying for a good 2 to 3 minutes. When it stopped, John was confused as to why he was hearing a baby crying in his cousin's house. Then, the thought finally hit him. There was no baby at their home. John decided to ask if anyone else heard that. Terry responded that he also heard it too. The two boys got scared and hid under the blanket and teased each other that it had to be a ghost. Everything got quiet again. 15 minutes went by and it seemed like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, the baby started crying again. This time, it was getting louder and louder and happening every 5 minutes in 1-minute intervals. John and Terry were both getting scared at this point. During this whole ordeal, there was a sudden crash of something midway down the stairs. John recalled that there was a heavy plywood leaning against the stairs wall. As soon as he heard that noise go off, the baby started to cry. It kept getting louder and louder, as if it was coming near the bedroom. It got quiet all of a sudden. The bedroom door was left ajar. As John was watching the door, there was a slight tick, tick, tick. The noise like when you slowly open the door and pause. John could see that the door was opened about 3 to 5 inches wide. Slowly but surely, a figure of a white fog started to appear in front of the door. It slowly drifted across the room and sat right next to Terry on the bed. John was terrified because he had the best view to see where the fog was drifting to. The figure of a person sitting next to Terry frightened him. That's when John whispered quietly to Terry, "That white fog is sitting next to you." Without any hesitation, Terry leapt over John and they both hid under the blankets. When they both peeked out of the blanket, the ghostly figure had dissipated and disappeared. While this was happening, the baby cries had stopped and both boys were laying on the bed trying to process what just happened. They thought about turning on the light but didn't want to take the risk. They were afraid that there might be something under the bed that might grab their feet when they run. Shortly afterwards, Terry fell asleep, and he dreamt that this black figure of some sort was trying to pull him towards it, while on the other side, his grandma, who passed away the weekend before, was trying to pull him towards her. In reality, he was having sleep paralysis. Terry broke out of his nightmare and asked if John heard him screaming for help. John replied, "Yes, but I was too scared, so I didn't do anything." As the both of them laid in bed wondering what was going to happen next, John started to hear some whispering downstairs. Keep in mind, there was no one in the house other than them. John couldn't hear exactly what the whispers were making out to be, but he knew he was hearing something. So he asked if Terry heard it too. Terry acknowledged the whispers. This continued on for a good 15 minutes. Then it stopped. As soon as it stopped, they heard the baby's cries. This happened all night until Terry's mom came home from work. They told her all about what happened, but she shrugged it off as if it was nothing. The following week, they took Terry to go see a shaman to see what happened. It turns out that, one time, Terry went to visit Minnesota, and apparently, he stumbled across the spirit of a dead baby. The dead baby followed him home and wanted to take his soul, so the family had to do some blessings and rituals to clean him.